Hi, I'm Chris Plum, head coach and CEO of the Carmel Swim Club. This is the Off the Deck podcast. Off the Deck champions Carmel Swim Club's mission, teaching excellence through swimming for life. To more fully meet that mission, we are constructing a new pool, the Carmel Swim Academy. Carmel Swim Academy will provide an entry point for children in central Indiana to have access to life-saving programs. It's true, drowning is the leading cause of injury-related death in children ages 1 to 4 and the second leading cause of death in children 5 to 9. But there is hope. Participation in formal swimming lessons can mitigate the risk of drowning by 88%. We are compelled to use our expertise in swimming to make our community safer and to ensure every child has the opportunity to learn to swim. To learn more, visit www.carmelswimacademy.org. Secondly, I wanted to talk about, I don't know if it's right, I just know it works. And today we're going to talk about this quote from teacher and novelist Amelia Barr on the difference between mediocrity and genius. She says, quote, "Everything good needs time. Don't do work in a hurry. Go into details. It pays in every way. Time means power for your work. Mediocrity is always in a rush, but whatever it's worth doing at all is worth doing with consideration. For genius is nothing more nor less than doing well what anyone can do badly." End quote. Source from the essay is A Successful Novelist in How They Succeeded. And obviously, Amelia is talking about writing, but I think this pertains to doing anything well. And in the sport of swimming, you just have to know that skills and getting better takes time, and details matter so incredibly much in our sport. I think even our guest coming up can tell you about this, but he once told me you could probably give someone doing 2 laps of the pool about 100 different things to work on in order to get better. So I just feel like it's incredibly important for all the young people out there working on things to get better, to take the time to dive into details, to learn how to do things right and correctly, and to do them again and again and again. Just can't reiterate that enough, the importance of taking your time, doing it right, and making sure you give yourself enough time to develop the habits to create how to do elite habits, particularly under stressful situations. And that's what it's all about in our sport. So, and I know this next guest understands that. We have the executive director of Indiana Swimming, Mr. Tony Young. Tony, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Great, Chris. Always fun to talk about swimming.
I know this should be an easy conversation for us, right?
Usually done over breakfast, so this is good.
Yeah. Why don't we first start with where your affinity and love of the water started for you?
You know, I just listened to your intro, and it was pretty amazing. We both grew up in upstate New York, so knowing the lakes and where my father grew up, he taught me to swim in one of those lakes up in upstate New York that was crystal clear bottoms. And you know, you didn't worry so much about how deep the water was, but when my dad jumped in the water with me that day, he had this amazing ability to connect with me without me worrying about fears. And I see that in all great coaches. And that was my family and everything, my mentors, everybody that I've been involved with over the years, the safety of the sport and the love of the sport. Many years ago, Operation Water Safety was started here in Indianapolis with a group of aquatic partners in Carmel Swim Club. And I'm sure you remember to this day, many of the young athletes on Carmel Swim Club created Operation Water Safety, teaching young people, let's say people from around underprivileged communities, to come in, experience water safety for the first time. You've already set the standard there for many years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lake and the connection with your father is something we both share. I remember my father throwing keys into the bottom of the pool and me diving down to get them. And it was a sunny day, and I remember it was probably for you in the summer. So we want that experience for young people to have that positive experience when they come in the pool and have those swim lessons. So for you, I know you took that passion and that learning and you made a career out of it. Now as an executive director from a higher level, where do you see our sport going, and how do we maybe get out of this pandemic?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I sat in a room with a couple dozen Indiana swimming leaders one day, and they asked me what the most important thing about my job was. And it was very simple to answer. It was culture. And I kind of wonder how the pandemic has affected our culture. And it's not necessarily about, it's not necessarily about what we do, but how we conduct ourselves in business. And I wonder how pandemic has touched each one of our clubs and our coaches and our families. How has that affected us now? Have we lost sight of that culture? And so many things that I have to look at as an executive director. We used to be top 5 in the nation as far as the number of athletes we have. Now we're not in the top 5 anymore. How has that affected our retention rates and our opportunities to recruit, to get swimmers into the sport? And it doesn't have to be necessarily at the elite level, but I'm talking about at the grassroots level, so we can build for that next quadrennium, which is actually going to be 3 years now. But, our commitment to build, promote, and achieve. I mean, USA Swimming's had that for many years, but it's building our programs back up with numbers. It's promoting the what we do well. And Chris, I know you do that. I walk into your pool and I spend time just walking around looking at the vision words across your pool. Your quote, for an example, I've worked with you at camps, and you've always got the message being the vision and the culture message always being consistent. And if you're asking how has that benefited our athletes and benefited our clubs or affected our clubs negatively, it's about those relationships we build through those messages. It's support, it's team culture, being apart from each other, whether it's athletes to athletes in their own club or athletes to other clubs. We have missed that. And that is the strength and the foundation of who we are. So if there's a challenge, it's just not being with each other enough. It's just not experiencing the up and downs enough and sharing what's worked for us in the pandemic. This is great. And I love, being on with you today, but we have sat across each other at breakfast and we just sit and talk swimming. And to me, that's a key part of making learning from each other. And we're missing that part right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tony. I miss my friends at coaching at meets. Like it's been, you go to a meet and you just miss that bond with the other coaches and having those conversations and learning how to get better at meets and just kids interacting, right, with other athletes across the state. And we just haven't had that. So, I know you're working through how we can run championship meets this summer. Where are we at with that? And what do you think, what can we do today to make sure we have a successful summer?
Well, obviously we have done a great deal of research, and I know it's, I take the criticism when we canceled our meets twice, over a period of time, or we had no spectators for the last championships. And it's because the decisions we're making are the best interest of everyone, our athletes, our coaches, our volunteers, and our families. And we want that to continue. What we hope we have this summer is opportunities to be able to open up meets to a championship season. I mean, experiencing more of the prelims and finals. I can't necessarily share the sites and things with you until Monday night at our board meeting, but know that we are going to have potentially prelims and finals for both senior state and age group state this summer. We don't know what spectators look like at this point. We hope things open up with the vaccines and everyone. But I think we are going to have a whole different experience this summer, as well as meets, bigger meets starting to open up. Many of the states around the United States, the clubs around the United States are traveling to Indiana. Interesting report came out from USA Swimming. We were tied for the most meets and opportunities for athletes to swim during the winter months. They're all during pandemic. We were tied for the top LSC in the country. And we know we did it right. I mean, from the day one, when you set foot in the NAT, return to the NAT meet, that was day one of us doing things right. And what separates us from the teams, the other LSEs, is we did it right. We did it. We had the most, but we were also following all of our protocols and adhering to what was best for our athletes. You're going to see a different summer. Open water's making a comeback. We'll have our Central Zone open water meet up at Pleasant Prairie up in Wisconsin. And we will have our state open water meet, which is actually going to be held in Ohio this year. So going back to our love for being in the lakes, I mean, open water, a day on the beach is much more fun for me than a day in the pool, but that's just a personal thing.
Yeah, well, I know all the athletes in Indiana appreciate the effort that Indiana Swimming went through just to have the opportunity. But I also know a lot of athletes that really want to swim that finals too and have more. Having just one swim in a lot of those meets probably limited some opportunities in a way. As athletes are planning and getting ready for these meets, do you feel that pretty confident in the finals and the prelims so those kids can get those second chances?
Feel very confident in that. I think we've gone through our site selection process. We've gone through all of the research. I think we're going to have those finals. Thinking back as a coach, though, in the winter in March, better planning was part of our evaluation process of March. We didn't give the kids enough rest in between events. There were times when we know we could have had better performances and we needed to give optimal rest, knowing that the athletes, it's not just swimming an event and getting back up again, but it's the entire meet and being able to be prepared for the entire meet. Think about a basketball player, LeBron James, at the beginning of the season always says, I'm not in legs, my legs aren't in game shape yet. Well, our kids are getting into game shape all the way through the season. So we have to adhere to their needs. And senior swimmers need more rest. You can't compare them to age group swimmers. They're trying to do elite swims that are the best in the nation. We've got to give them the opportunity to be able to perform.
Well, Tony, I think every coach in Indiana would agree with you 100%, and the athletes would probably agree with you 110%. So we are so glad that there's being evaluations with that. I could tell you from our experience, many athletes had to swim within 10 minutes of each other, and that definitely hindered some performances. So we look forward to that. So if we were to talk maybe pre-pandemic or coming out of the pandemic, because you go to clubs all across the country, all across Indiana, can you speak to us about some of the commonalities you see in clubs and coaches that are doing things well?
It's very interesting how we look at our coaches. Let's say we have almost 800 coaches in Indiana, and so many of them are good at so many different things. But unless I experience watching them, Jim Voss, age group coach up at Duneland, he has great age group kids. He's always one of the top teams in the state in age group state championships. But he worked with one of our developmental camps one year, and I actually got to watch him on deck. And I'm just going, wow, now I know why he's as good. I had to actually see it. Yeah. And the same thing happened when I went down to visit Ray Lewis at Indiana. I was watching practice and I was going through the different coaches. And I said, how do I evaluate or how do I share what I just learned? And I says, I can't share it. You have to see it. You have to see how they communicate with the athletes. And it is about communication. It is about their passion. And it is about consistency. Message that you share quite often is team. And every one of the championship foundations of great teams has been about the team concept. What's best for the team? What you hear, how you hear athletes express their experience. They're all going to be tired. You're all going to push them to their limits, but they see value in it. And I think teachers are great educators. So I looked at the picture behind me, and my wife's pretty creative thinker. She's an artist. She's a businesswoman. And I look at the great coaches, and they are exactly that. They're artists, they're businessmen, they're businesswomen, and the perspectives that they're able to share. But I will go back to one thing that I learned better this year than any other time is business structure and a business sense of a great CEO or a great head coach how did they make it through the pandemic? How did they survive having to pay for more pool time, less kids in a lane? What about your coaches? How did you keep them? And all of them pretty much had good business plans going into the pandemic. So their structures were set to survive during the most difficult times. And that was, which was very impressive. I talked to, just yesterday down at the Tier Pro Series meet, I was down there volunteering, and one of the coaches from Long Island Aquatics was there. And I asked them, do you still use that 50-meter pool out in Long Island for competition? They say, yes, but we built our own 50-meter pool side by side with it. And it was interesting. I said, okay, you did, yeah. And we put a tent up over it, and we flipped up the sides of the tent during the cold weather months up to January, I think. And it was considered an outdoor venue. So creativity of how they were using their aquatic centers made a difference in how many athletes were still be able to train without skipping a beat. So the creativity part, the business part, the passion for the sport, and the best clubs that have survived during this period of time have communicated very well with their athletes and their families. And I think that the families appreciated that more than you know.
Yeah, I would tell you that I think our communication styles have changed, and realizing that as much as we're all hating the Zoom meeting, it was a great way to connect with people and easier to connect, right? And so I know the technology in our sport has changed because of COVID, and you've been on the live cast, broadcasting at meets for a long time now, but it seems like you've taken that to another level. Where do you think that's going to go, and how has that been for you watching and commentating on these meets over the time?
Well, I'll take just step one. As far as, you're right, many of the things we've learned through COVID are going to help us continue communication in a different way. We know we will. I'm sure you will as well. And we have an easy access to communication. We can't say that we weren't available anymore. We couldn't take time off. It's there. But the webcasts themselves, I think one of the neat things about me personally for a webcast, I get to watch all of our swimmers. I think it's important. I think what is different in my job compared to maybe how other people approach it, I really like getting to know the swimmers. I've missed those camps, Chris. I've really missed getting on deck and watching those kids at the camps and joke around and have fun. But it's knowing them and watching them swim and watching what they're capable of, and that, when you watch it, you can evaluate it, and you really see things that maybe one person on a webcast from over in Australia, and I tell you, we do get this over, grandma and grandpa are now building a fan base. And this is so important this year of all years. How are we going to build up our culture of people, this is the best sport in the world, and getting people to join us if we can't create a larger fan base? And maybe this is what the webcasts have allowed us to do. So we need to make it entertaining. We need to get back on deck and do interviews with those kids. Chris, that's one of the most fun things. Sometimes I think we should teach them their cliches, and we should teach them how to do interviews, but they're pretty good at it. They're funny, and, get to know the kids. I think that's one thing that maybe the webcast can do, maybe this type of a culture can do, is getting to know the kids personally. Okay, well, you're a high school state champion, or you're a senior national champion in this event. Great. But let's talk about all the other things. My favorite award at high school state is mental attitude, because you get to hear, and you've had so many of them, and Carmel has, but it's so cool to get to know that these are student athletes. And it's the most fun thing to be able to recognize them as who they are on those broadcasts, and not just a swimmer with a time. So,
yeah, and that brings up a great point. I know through all the championships of Carmel, some of the most proud things that I am of a coach is when the mental attitude. We had one this year. Maggie Love just does amazing things for our sport, for her teammates, for the people in the community of Carmel. And she's got like a 4.4 GPA. She's going to study biomedical engineering, right? So it is amazing what these kids can do, given the tools that they have. You know, and I think you're speaking to the coaches and the communities that we have. What do you think, Indiana, I know you've been around the country, but what makes Indiana special and different from some of the other places you've seen?
I spent a couple of years outside of Indiana. I worked in Illinois for a couple of years. And the perception of Indiana swimming is the coaches get along. They seem to be able to create an environment that's different than other LSCs. It's not so much of a, let's say, a competition. Not there's always, everybody's competitive. But and the competitive part of it, my favorite moment back in coaching and so long ago is when Dave Gibson walked across the pool deck and shook my hand after a senior state championship meet. And we both complimented each other on their kids' performances. And that peer recognition is so important to each other, because it's not about always us being recognized in a newspaper. It's about us being recognized by our peers. And that respect, I think, is what separates that. Now, that being said, the fact that we've got like 35 indoor 50-meter pools is not a bad thing, right? We can create a level of competition that most people can't. I look at what my goals would be for performance in Indiana swimming, and that's providing more long course opportunities for our athletes and more splashes. And it doesn't have to be big 3-day prelims and final meets. We have the facilities just to offer almost what you would call a super splash, but kids gaining experience through competition. You referenced it earlier, doing the little things, but doing it in multiple environments. It's like what happens if you go out to California to swim in national meets and you're swimming out in Irvine compared to swimming here at the natatorium. You're swimming with the sun above your head. And how do we best prepare our athletes for that? It's multiple environments and multiple voices. So.
Yeah, and that is important with the California versus Indiana. I've had several athletes on their way to great swims hit a lane line and lose their spot in backstroke. So I think we can all attest to that. And I think we would be remiss not to discuss the high school championship and club relationship, which I think is unique and different here. And I think that leads to success. Now, based on what you've seen, how are those relationships? And I don't know what the right word exactly here is, but I do feel that our bonds and relationships with high school is enhancing our club swimming here, where in other states that might not be the case. Is that what you see?
Definitely, in a lot of different ways. In Illinois swimming, the club coaches are not the high school coaches, the head coaches like yourself. And that's just because of the restrictiveness of their high school association rules. And they still have great swimming, don't get me wrong, but it is a benefit for us to be able to have that consistency of leadership throughout the entire year for performance. Our IHSAA relationship started way back with Sandy Searcy when she was commissioner at the IHSAA, a former swim coach. She was just amazing in communicating with the coaches and providing the best competitive environment. Obviously, the NAT, most other LSCs don't have the NAT. We can bring fan base in, and we have a great environment. We can do a lot of some things that are special at the NAT. But what it really boils down to is business. If the if the high schools control the facilities, we have to have good relationships with your high school administrators and so on to be allowed to develop that feeder system that you have, and many of our great programs have across the state, is that feeder system feeds the high school program. Then it becomes a community team. It's not about high school, it's not about club, it's a community. It's when you say Carmel Swimming, you're not just talking about high school, you're talking about talking about age group to elite or development to, from grassroots, getting in the water for the first time all the way to excellence. And that is a key component is when that first 50-meter pool was built there in Carmel, our superintendent of schools wanted to know that the community could be part of it. And one of the things that it was important for us to do was relate to him how all of the community was using it in different ways. And I think you're going to have an amazing opportunity to do that in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and I think it starts, with the youngest, and like you said, that build part of the program. And just making sure, number one, you're teaching your kid to be safe, around water. And like, there is a love and affinity for the pool I think we as humans have, and we've got to continue to enhance that and celebrate that for our people.
Well, I hope that the adults have that opportunity too, because the biggest fear that affects young people from swimming is the fear of the parents learning how to swim, or their fear of water. And, you're right. Being in upstate New York, it was just a culture. You got to know how to swim. That's just the way it was. You're going to be around the lake. That's who you are.
Yeah. And what do you think your vision here for Indiana swimming? I know we talked about the quad, but I don't know. We're going to have to come up with a new name, triplet or something.
What do you call it when it's 3 years, right?
I'm confused by it. Every year I talk about quad and then I go, no, it's 3 years. What do you think, or what is the vision for Indiana swimming for the next 3 years?
Before the pandemic hit, that January Mid-States Championship, and I take 6 months back, we were really hitting our stride. We had tremendous camps. We had tremendous championships. We had great mid-states. We started to develop a new Team Indiana culture from age group to elite, even identifying programs that were going to accentuate the younger swimmers more so than even the elite swimmers, and rebuilding that energy. And the only way we're going to do that is getting back in the water together and creating opportunities. I don't want to sit back, and I know this may not sound realistic, but I don't want to sit back and wait for money to come to us. We've got to go out and find ways to reinvest in our programs. We got to knock on doors to ask our coaches to become back involved with us again. You are the greatest example we have of what excellence is. All of our top coaches that participate in teaching, sometimes the many voices, in my mind, that's my philosophy, the many voices. What I've learned over the years through the many voices is what I try to share with everyone else. Now, how do we build? We got to evaluate our needs first. We sat back in a meeting, was it October 2019 at Lucas Oil Stadium? And we were at Lucas Oil Stadium for a meeting, and you and I and some other coaches were there, and we were kind of talking about what Indiana swimming is today and what we want to look like in the future. And the only reason thanks to Eric Newberger, one of our former swimmers at Carmel, we were able to just look at what excellence looked like, just a picture of it, and take that snapshot in our brains and try to recreate what that picture looks like. We've got Olympic trials coming up in 3 years, not just this summer, but we have to look past this summer in Olympic trials. How do we lead the nation again in 18 and under qualifiers for Olympic trials? How do we get that done? What meets do we need to be able to create that environment? The neat thing is we can bring competition to us. We want to bring higher levels of competition to us. And you of all people know that, like Ian Murray and some of these coaches that you've worked with over the years have just these centers of excellence. We want them to come to us. We want to partner with them. We want to find other LSCs that have the same passion we do. We created the duel in the pool a couple years ago. It was just against Illinois, but it was a great environment. So you look at what the duel in the pool does for USA Swimming, had the opportunity to do the same for us. Our coaches were amazing. There was a few fans in the stands, but the kids had that team-on-team environment. And I know a lot of coaches and clubs do that on their own, but I think the more we can put our athletes of excellence together, the more they learn and collaborate with each other. I'd also like to see more of our athletes swimming in college. Before programs get dropped again, I'd like to see more of our athletes competing on past high school, because I do think it's a sport that transcends more than just being 18 years old, and master's programs as well. Reinvesting back is going to take some long-range strategic planning. I think our organization has taken steps through the pandemic to really work on its structure. And the better business structure, the better structure we have, the more that we're going to have to reinvest in our athletes. Moving forward, if everybody's goal is always to be the best LSC in the country, I'm not really worried about I don't know, trying to mirror what other LSCs do. I always like to hear and learn. I don't get that part. I'd rather set the standard. And you got to have coaches with vision in your LSC to do that. I mean, they've got to be willing to take risks. And I think you know that more than most. If we don't go out and take risks, we're not going to see the reward. Now, we'll fall on our faces a couple of times. We always have. But we come back with that energy and programs at all levels. You know, it's everything from age group to elite, open water to state championships to zones to sectionals to Olympic trials. We want more of our kids involved in qualifying and then helping clubs have the opportunity to take them to those meets. If you're asking me about things like how do we have a vision of helping our athletes develop more at the elite level, expand our travel support to get them to go to the Tier Pro Series meets, getting up against better competition all the way through the year and not just at one point at the end of the year. So those are just some thoughts that were thrown out there.
Yeah, as they say, high tide floats all boats, right?
You got it.
Yeah. So we're going to, this has been great, Tony. We're going to finish up. I like to call this the fast finisher. So I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Hopefully you can answer them quickly. So the first question is, we're assuming that everybody knows how to kick. So who in history or any time would you like to do a social kick with?
A social kick with?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good one. You know, it sounds really strange, but I've been doing like an athlete of the week, one of our Wall of Fame athletes of the week. I'd like to pick one of our Wall of Fame athletes, and because their stories are so interesting, and get to just to talk to them about what swimming was like there in their era, and how they enjoyed that sport, and what can we learn from them to make our sport even better.
Yeah, I've seen those on your on the Instagram there. So let's pretend you're coaching at the OTC. What song would you least like to pop up when you're on the pool deck?
Least like to pop up, man, Chris. Are you in charge of your music during the weight room?
It's like 50-50. Kind of depends on the mood that I'm in. Usually the harder the workout, the more I tend to let them choose the music. Obviously, it's got to be clean, but
yeah.
If it's a long practice and they're not a lot of rest, I'm usually in charge because I'm the one who's listening the most. So
I let the kids do it one year, and they created a couple CDs for me, and they decorated and whatever. They had a great mix of music that you can't imagine, that you wouldn't think kids would want to do it. I come from a radio background. I mean, I was in radio and TV in college. There's not a whole lot of music I don't want to hear. It's more about what I do want to hear. And radio, I'm so versatile in what I like to hear. So I'm sorry I didn't answer that question probably the way you wanted, but I like the kids to be able to, their music taste expands time. It really does.
Yeah. All right. Deep end or shallow end for you?
Deep.
Yeah. What would be your perfect IM order?
I like it the way it is.
I
like short axis, long axis.
I knew as the executive director of Indiana Swimming, you were going to answer it that way. Would you rather be in a pool that's too cold or too warm?
Too cold.
Okay. Lane leader or caboose?
Oh, God. Not even a question. Lane leader. You can affect so many people so many different ways. And you know, the thing that I've shared with so many coaches or so many athletes over the years, when they come out of the pool and said, well, coach didn't say anything to me. I said, did you get noticed? Well, you're the back of the lane. You're not going to get noticed. You're the front of the lane. You're going to get noticed.
Yeah. Right. So how many strokes are you allowed in the 25 in a kick set?
How many strokes are you allowed in a 25 in a kick set? Let's see.
Or like how many strokes are you allowed per lap? It's not a trick question.
You know, I kind of look at that in a couple different ways.
Okay.
It's how many inside the flags.
So you like them to turn like in a race turn?
Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, what's your favorite Gatorade color?
Oh, fruit punch, red.
Your standard, huh?
Yeah, it's always has been.
Okay. Tony, this has been great. Anything you would like to say or add, or anything you're working on that the people should know or hear about?
Look for a lot of communication coming out within the next week. Our board of directors meetings here this Monday. We'll have all of the information about where our championship meets will be held and hosted. Some of the technical information will be put into the newsletters and available as soon as we can. But many more opportunities, such as our open water championships. Be prepared for all of that. Your athletes are so diverse, and there's so many of them. Give them opportunities in different environments. You'll find out they'll stay in the sport and enjoy the sport for a long time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. And we'll see you around on the pool deck.
It was fun, Chris. Good luck to you.
Thank you.